All right. Thank you, Steve and Jean. So I started my career as an inner city school teacher and entrepreneur. And then, like many people, I was inspired to begin a life of public service. And 1,298 days ago, I began a job as Hillary Clinton's Senior Advisor for Innovation. Not that I'm counting. This has been an absolutely spectacular opportunity for me. I hope one day to be an old man in my 70s, in my 80s, with my grandkids on my knee and telling them some of the stories of what I did in this role and what I saw in this role and the lessons that I learned. It really hasn't been a means to an end, but an end unto itself. And what I wanted to do for these 15 minutes was share five things in 15 minutes that I've come to believe with all of my head and all of my heart over the last 1,298 days. The first thing is that there is a massive shift in geopolitical power taking place right now. Most people who talk about shifts in geopolitical power do so on a geographic basis. The presumed shift of power from the United States and Europe to Asia, or from the global north to the global south. Whether that is true or not, the degree to which that is true, I will leave to other people to discuss. But what I do know with near certainty is that in just about all 195 countries on planet Earth, there is a significant shift in geopolitical power taking place, and that shift in power is from hierarchies to citizens and networks of citizens. There's a massive shift in power taking place all over the world right now, from hierarchies like government, like large media conglomerates, to citizens and networks of citizens. And the internet is a facilitator of this change. And I've seen very practically how this has manifested itself in three ways. First, it has accelerated the speed and growth of political movements. If you think about like the anti-SOPA movement here in the United States, or if you think about the revolutions in the Middle East, the internet or social media did not make those revolutions happen. It didn't necessarily make them successful, but it did make them bigger and it did make them faster. The second thing it did, enriching information environments. One thing that's much more true today than was true 1,298 days ago was that the ability of a hierarchy, whether it's a dictator or a large media conglomerate, to control the media, to control the information in a country is wildly diminished. A dictator can no longer determine what information you know or what media you see. Thing three. Thing three is leadership structures have been wildly disrupted. If you think about things in the United States like the anti-SOPA movement, if you think about the revolutions in the Middle East, there's nobody's face you're going to put on a t-shirt leading these movements. There's no charismatic figure organizing and inspiring the masses on high. Rather, the leadership structures of modern political movements increasingly look like the internet itself, like a web instead of a pyramid, top-down and controlled. Now, I say this by way of explanation, not by way of advocacy. This is both good and bad. It's good in that movements are increasingly citizen-centered and less rooted in, say, a cult of personality. It's bad in that once a revolution is over, or once a piece of online piracy legislation has been defeated, then what? There's a power gap. There's an institutional gap. Where's Nelson Mandela? Where's Václav Havel? Where's the institutional basis upon which we can now govern? And in the face of this shifting power, the sum of it is a loss of control. The 21st century is a terrible time to be a control freak. And the entities that are really losing that control are the hierarchies. Now, in the face of this loss of control, a lot of countries outside of the United States are pushing back, especially in networked spaces, especially on the internet. And they're doing so in the name of security. They're saying that the internet is a dark and dangerous place with offensive content. We, the people in the white shirts, the red ties, and the pinstripe suits, it's time for us to take over. And they are trying to control what ought to be a largely open space. And they do so in the name of security. Most people believe that security and liberty are equal and opposite. The more you have of one, the less you have of the other. But what I really believe is that each is actually dependent on the other. Liberty without security is fragile. Security without liberty is oppressive. And so the key for us, when I think about the future of the internet, when I think about the battle that is going to be fought for the next 5 years over the future of the internet and whether it remains open or whether it looks like a patchwork of intranets, it's going to be about whether we get this balance right or not. The third thing that I've come to believe with all of my head and my heart is that we need to take the focus that the president has had on innovation as the core of our strategy for building our future economy, and we've got to double down on it. And I think that other countries ought to do the exact same. 40% of America's GDP, 40% of America's GDP come from companies that did not exist 30 years ago. 40% of America's GDP is equal to $6 trillion of annual economic activity. And if the United States is going to be the great economic power in 30 years that it's been for the last 30 years, then we have to be able to fill up this blank slide with the logos of companies that do not exist today. That's a good segue to the fourth thing that I've come to believe with all of my head and all of my heart. We need to empower women at all segments of our economic activity. Thank you. And of our political activity. I'll accept those claps on behalf of Secretary Clinton. Because, you know, it's her 65th birthday today. And she has done so much to raise our IQ about the importance of not just giving lip service to the empowerment of women in security spaces and in economic spaces, but really digging in hard on this. Empowering women economically and in the security domain is not a moral issue. It is not a fairness issue. It is not merely a moral issue. It is not merely a fairness issue. It is also a security issue and an economic issue. A study by Goldman Sachs said that in the United States, here, if we narrowed barriers to full participation by women in the workforce, our GDP would increase by 9%. And if the same happened in the Eurozone, it would be an increase by 14%. Modest efforts to narrow the gap for fuller participation by women in APEC countries like China, like Vietnam, like South Korea, it's estimated would increase the per capita earnings there by 14% by 2020. These are big numbers. These are what we call macroeconomically significant numbers. And as I've traveled around the world, I think I'm going on 1 million miles, over 700,000 miles. I don't know how many countries I've been in. I've seen this constantly. I've been in so many countries where women do 2/3 of the work for 1/3 of the pay and own less than 2% of the land. And so as we all struggle with the question of economic growth, the single most economically effective approach would be for us to create more space for women to engage from the bottom of the ladder to the boardroom. I saw this just 2 weeks ago. I was in Pakistan. And I'll tell you what, it was a tough time to be there. In just the very brief time that I was there, there were 2 big bombings. 14-year-old girl named Malala was shot in the face. And you know, the security environment, look, it was tough. And the one story that gave me the most hope the one story that made me feel the best was told to me by a woman named Maria Umar. And she told me that she started a company called the Women's Digital League. And she said, I started this company because I believed that women could really throw their shoulders and be effective, value-added partners in the microtasking space in IT. And she told me, she said, I now have 70 women who work for me, many of whom work for her in some of the most difficult places in Pakistan. She says, I've got clients in the United States, in East Asia, in the United Arab Emirates. I said, well, how do you get this business? She goes, I get it all through LinkedIn. It's fascinating. So this woman, this young woman, Maria Umar, started the Women's Digital League. She now employs 70 other women. She sources all of her deal flow through LinkedIn. And I just listened to this, and I'm amidst such a difficult security situation, all of which, let's be blunt, has been created by men. The overwhelming number, a ridiculous percentage of the victims of whom are women. And I hear this story from her, and I say we're doing something wrong. We also need to empower women in the security spaces. In the last 20 years, there have been literally hundreds of peace treaties that have been negotiated, a majority of which have failed. And a backwards analysis of all of these treaties show that women make up 7% of the negotiators. This despite the fact that women are natural peacemakers and natural community builders. And if you just look at the evidence of what they've done, when that 7% has been given a seat at the mahogany table, their impact has been very distinct and very important. Think about the Good Friday Accords in Northern Ireland in 1998. It was women negotiators who insisted on provisions related to reconciliation, integration, and victims' rights. And those three things that were pushed for and bowled through by women proved to be indispensable to the durability and success of the Good Friday agreements and diffusing what had been a horribly malignant conflict between the Protestants and the Catholics in Northern Ireland. So what two grander challenges are there than economic growth and security? And from my perspective, what I've come to believe with all of my head and all of my heart is that our best approach to both is to get more women involved at all levels. The fifth and final thing that I've learned on 1,298 days on the job, we have to stay out of the gray twilight. 100 years ago, the President of the United States was Teddy Roosevelt. He said something that has really sort of lit the path for me. He said, "It is far better to dare mighty deeds, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy much nor suffer much, because they dwell in the gray twilight that knows neither victory nor defeat. It is far better to dare mighty deeds, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy much nor suffer much, because they dwell in the gray twilight that knows neither victory nor defeat." As I've traveled the world, I've seen entirely too much gray twilight. And I really think that we're in a moment in time where there are so many grand global challenges, where our world is getting more complicated and not less complicated, that we have to be willing to make mistakes of commission rather than omission. We need to remain fearless, and we need to stay out of the gray twilight. So I feel really good about the time that I've spent in government. A lot of people oftentimes think of government as a tough place to work and what have you, but what I really believe is that my time has left my idealism and my optimism undiminished. And I think that if we recognize these 5 things as grand challenges that more and more of us ought to get behind, then my optimism and my idealism will only continue to grow. Thank you so much. Thank you.